Once upon a time in a city, there lived a poor grasscutter named Wali Dad. He earned just enough money to survive on, but every day, he put aside a little bit of his earnings, usually around an eighth of what he made. In this way, over a period of 6 months, he managed to save up a good amount of money, about 30,000 dinars. But even though he was a poor man, he wasn't greedy or miserly, and so he began to think that he didn't really need all that money. Then one day he met a merchant from the neighboring country of Khaistan. Hearing that the merchant was going to the royal court there, Wali Dad asked him if he would deliver something for him. The merchant agreed, and Wali Dad gave him a heavy bag, saying, "Here, take this bag of coins to the Queen of Khaistan. Give them to her as a gift, and tell her that it's from a well-wisher." The merchant was suspicious. He wondered why a poor man like this would give such a valuable gift to the queen. Nonetheless, he took the bag and went on his way. When he delivered the bag of coins to the queen, she was indeed very surprised and pleased. She had never received any gift more valuable than this. She thanked the merchant for delivering the gift, and asked him about the grasscutter. When the merchant told her that Wali Dad was just a poor man, she became even more grateful. Moved by his generosity, she decided that she had to repay his kindness. She picked out some of her finest silks and gave them to the merchant, asking him to deliver them to the grasscutter, along with a note asking him to come to the palace when he returned. The merchant returned to Wali Dad with the fabrics and the note. Once again, he tried to warn Wali Dad not to go to the palace, but the grasscutter was insistent. Excited by his impending meeting with the queen, he set off on his journey. Meanwhile, when the merchant delivered the silks to the king of Khaistan, he was astounded. He had never seen anything so beautiful. He immediately took them to the king, who was equally amazed by their beauty. The king felt as though his own splendor paled in comparison, and knew that he had to express his gratitude to whoever had sent the gift. Thinking hard, he decided to send 12 magnificent horses in return, 4 elephants and 8 chariots. When Wali received the horses, he was overwhelmed. He had never seen anything so beautiful, and although he didn't know what to do with them, he was too stunned to refuse the gift. So he sent a note thanking the king and queen for their thoughtfulness. At the same time, news of the grasscutter's magnificence spread throughout the kingdom, and many courtiers were envious of his good fortune. Some said that he must have stolen the money. Others claimed that he had been granted the wealth as a reward for his piety. But no one could say for certain what had become of the poor grasscutter. After a while, the king and queen were struck by curiosity. They wanted to know who this mysterious grasscutter was. So the king got ready, donned splendid garments, and rode out with the queen to visit Wali Dad. However, they didn't want to reveal their identities, so they left their escorts and entourage behind, and arrived at Wali's house as ordinary folk. When Wali heard that the king and queen were visiting him, he was terrified. He couldn't believe how he had gone from being a simple grasscutter to receiving guests of such high status. He hid under his bed, hoping they would leave without seeing him. As the king and queen entered, they saw a dirty old hut, and thought to themselves, "So this is the magnificent palace of the rich Grasscutter. How strange." They looked around, but there was no sign of Wali Dad. They sat down on a nearby bench and waited patiently. At this moment, Wali Dad was trembling under the bed, lamenting his fate. Suddenly, 2 heavenly peries, or fairies, appeared before him. Seeing his frightened face, they asked him why he was hiding. Wali Dad explained everything to them, saying, "I don't want to meet the king and queen. I am just a lowly grasscutter, and I am afraid they will be disappointed in me if they see how poor and simple my life is." The fairies listened patiently and then said, "Don't worry, Wali, we will help you." With a wave of their magic wands, they transformed his humble hut into a grand palace with golden arches, shining domes, and walls adorned with precious stones. Then they turned his patched-up clothes into fine garments, and his worn-out turban into one made of gold. Finally, they sprinkled holy water on him, which washed away his dirt and made him look handsome and regal. Then the fairies approached the king and queen, who were still waiting on the bench, and invited them to stand up. To their amazement, the palace now looked magnificent, and Wali Dad was no longer a raggedy grasscutter, but a handsome prince. Startled by the sudden change, the king and queen stood up and followed the fairies inside the palace. Inside, they found Wali seated on a golden throne. He was still nervous and bowed his head in submission. But when the fairies sprinkled holy water on him, he regained his confidence and lifted his head up proudly. The king and queen walked up to him and sat down beside him on the throne. When they removed their veils, they realized with astonishment that the mysterious grasscutter was none other than the Shahzadi, a princess from a neighboring kingdom. The princess had fallen in love with the king at first sight, but he had no idea who she was. When they learned that she was a princess, they embraced each other joyfully and expressed their mutual love. News of their engagement spread quickly throughout the 3 kingdoms, causing great rejoicing. All the fairies and genies came to attend their wedding, turning the whole palace into a place of great celebration. They exchanged garlands and vows, and the king lavished expensive jewels on his bride. They spent a few happy days together in the palace, and everyone wished that their happiness would last forever. But for some reason, the fairies only transformed the Shahzadi back into a princess. After they wed and the celebrations were over, they all went to the fairy realm. There the fairies revealed to her that they had tested her character by sending her as a grasscutter to the human world and were pleased with how she had behaved. Then they waved their magic wands, and poof, she was back in her original form. However, she didn't seem as happy as before. Looking into her heart, the fairies discovered that she missed her simple life as a grasscutter and yearned to return to the human world. She asked the fairies to restore her to her former state. They agreed and brought her back to her grasscutter's hut. As soon as she reached the hut, she changed back into a grasscutter and picked up her old tools. She had no memory of her time as a princess and was confused by her new circumstances. Just then, the king arrived. He was searching for the Shahzadi because he couldn't bear to live without her. When he saw her, he was overjoyed and embraced her tightly. Shahzadi recognized him as the kind and loving husband she once knew. They both felt immense joy and couldn't stop smiling. After spending some time together, the Shahzada and the king returned to the palace, leaving the Shahzada to resume her grasscutter's life. The king missed his wife terribly, but he understood that she had found happiness in her simple life and that no one could take that away from her. So he respected her wishes and never forced her to return to her royal duties. They continued to meet in secret from time to time, enjoying each other's company and reminiscing about their magical love story. And that's the end of our story. Thank you for listening. If you liked the story, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already, then don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.